And now our president, David Basil.
Thank you, Ron, and good morning, fellow Rotarians and guests. Welcome to our fantastic club in the heart of the land of champions. Chris Barker, we have some guests.
Good morning again, Rotarians. As you see, we have a full house today, and we have a lot of guests with us. I'm basically going to ask these people to stand so we can make a brief introduction, and there are others that will be introduced throughout today's meeting. But joining us from the Cleveland Club are Beverly and David Krasinski. Sorry about that. Thank you for joining us. And then joining us from the Northampton Club is Hans Becker. Thank you. And once again, joining us is Bob Haydorn. Now, Bob, I know your title's changed over the past few years. Are you now Rotary Youth Exchange or?
Right, District Chairman.
District Chairman. Well, thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Bob.
Thank you, Chris. And now, the 3-minute Rotarian. We're going to continue the rotation for 3-minute Rotarians so that everybody in the club has a cycle, has a chance. And today's 3-minute Rotarian is Evan McCauley, and as Ron indicated, for those who weren't able to attend the annual dinner, Evan has been recognized as our Rotarian of the Year for 2015-16. So, Evan.
Good morning, fellow Rotarians.
Good morning.
All right, so the 3 points of the 3-minute Rotarian are personal, business, and Rotary. And I'm going to tell you all about those 3 things, and the time starts now. I'll keep it real close to 3 minutes. So I grew up in Stowe, Ohio, right on the 6th hole of Fox Den, and I was grateful to have the opportunity to attend Western Reserve Academy for high school. I loved my experience there. I got to travel the world. I made lifelong friends, learned new sports. The campus is beautiful. Just amazing place, and really grateful to have the opportunity to go there. When I attended there, my older brother Ryan, was a senior when I was a freshman. And it was the 1 year that I wasn't consistently the #1 golfer there. So golf is something that I love to do. I love skiing as well. Those are the two things that I spend my time doing. I have an older sister as well. She lives up in Twinsburg, Ohio with her hubby, and she has 2 wild, crazy, and perfect little boys. Brady's 6 years old and Declan is 2, and I just absolutely love spending time with them. So on to Miami University, I graduated with Supply Chain and Operations Management from the Farmer School of Business. From there, I moved out to Chicago to start a business, a third-party logistics company, building a business shipping freight from point A to point B. From there, I transitioned into leading a sales team, putting together, managing, and leading a sales team for a marketing company out of San Francisco called Headsets.com. Just provided office headset solutions to businesses. So after that, I was out in Chicago and loved my time out in Chicago. I was there for about 3 years after graduation. It really gave me an opportunity to grow up from a recent college grad to who I am today. And basically told myself that there were only 2 reasons that I would ever leave Chicago. 1, for a better career, and 2, for the right girl. So I ended up getting both. While I was out there working for Headsets.com, I met my beautiful girlfriend, Michelle. Many of you have met her and know her, and she very much enjoys coming out to all our events. So when I met her, we were actually in Evanston, Illinois, just a stone's throw away from Rotary International headquarters. And if you're ever out there, you should go there for breakfast. They have an amazing cafeteria in the basement there. Just an FYI. So I moved back home. I had an amazing career and a girl with me. It was perfect. So I joined my father at Merrill Lynch. He had been there for about 32 years. And what we do is we believe in the importance of financial comfort. I'm going to tell you a little bit about who we work for, how we help them, and why we do what we do. So our average client is a family and an individual just like you in an amazing community. We work right in downtown Hudson, and it's an amazing place. So our average client is roughly $1.2 million, and our minimum client is $300,000. We focus on our clients' life priorities, so their family, their home, their health, work, leisure, charitable giving. That is what we focus on for our clients and helping them achieve their goals in those spaces comfortably. We specialize in retirement income planning. In particular, we offer a retirement solution that we find not a lot of people know exists and not a lot of other firms offer. It's a great way to help you preserve, protect, and control your retirement assets, anything that you haven't paid tax on, like an IRA or a 401k. So my job on the team is to grow the business and to help our clients out with their financial planning. And I very much enjoy working with my father right across the street. So that transitions into a little bit about Rotary and why I'm here at Rotary and what I get out of Rotary. I first came to the club when I was about 10 years old. In, I believe it was about 4th grade. My mom was a teacher in Ravenna. She taught 4th grade for 30 years. She's now retired. And my dad, he was right here in downtown Hudson, a member of this club. So he was responsible to take me to the bus stop every morning, and I didn't get on the bus at 6:30, 7 a.m. as a 4th grader. So he would bring me to the club, I'd have breakfast, and he'd drive me to work. So he really made the breakfast meetings work. And it makes me look at the 2 Hudson clubs and think that, Pat, maybe we could, merge together a little bit on that. But Rotary really gives me an opportunity to, and this is a mantra, but it's something I believe in, join leaders, exchange ideas, and take action. I'm able to come meet with you every morning here on Wednesday, get to know all of you. It's an amazing time. We are like a family here in an amazing community. And I'm very grateful that my career and my growing business allow me the opportunity to be here every Wednesday morning. Not everyone at my age has that flexibility, and that's something that I very much enjoy. So that's my 3-minute Rotarian. I do have a little addendum, and I'm going to take an extra minute because Rich Warfield did, basically. And Ed, you can find me for this later, okay? So, you know, everyone loves the feeling after a new haircut or a fresh new dress shirt. It's something that I've come to love. Everyone loves, you know, a new Facebook or a LinkedIn profile or a profile picture. And what everyone in this room should love is a nice new professional photograph for our amazing new Club Runner website. I was on there the other day on the directory, and it's one thing that we're lacking. We have all of our contact information, but we have new Rotarians here. Dan Filburn, Pete Opperman's planning on joining the club, and it's nice for them to be able to go to a website and put a name to a face. So at some point here in August, I'm gonna have a professional photographer come into my office here right in downtown, 303 and 91. It's gonna be, you know, a Tuesday and a Thursday from about 11 to 1 or so, and I hope to see all of your faces there. We're going to take nice professional photographs of each person that's there. You can use it for LinkedIn, use it for Facebook, use it for the Rotary Club website. We'll offer a light lunch as well. And that's my add-on, my little gift to you. More to come on that. And thank you very much for the time. I know I went over 3 minutes.
Will you be sending a reminder email about that?
Sure, absolutely. I'll bring an invitation.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Evan. And that is a great idea on the photos. And we'll get those up on the website. Next week's 3-minute Rotarian is Phil Tobin. I don't see Phil here. Maybe you'll remind him. I sent him an email. I'll send him another. Okay, a few announcements, reports, and updates. First, Joe Zapatowski to introduce the Straczynskis, excuse me, for Rotary International.
Good morning, Rotarians. Good morning, Joe. It's my pleasure this morning to introduce to you David Straczynski, past district governor 1998-99. He's a member of our district's Centennial Committee, and that's his job today to tell you about the Centennial Symphony Concert on Sunday, October 23rd, in honor of Arch Klump, who used to play with the symphony. With Dave, as you've already noted, is his lovely wife, Beverly, who is to be district governor in 2018-19. So we have some prestigious people here. David, if you'll take over.
Thanks, Joe. President Dave, thank you. So I brought Arch with me today. This is a sculpture from David Deming, who is the former director of the Cleveland Museum of Art. He's done the Jim Thome statue downtown at the ballpark and a few others. He's working on a Superman statue, and someday we hope Arch will grow up into a life-size bronze down at the Rotary Plaza and across from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So, but I thought that he would like to come and see everybody today. I want to thank your club. You're one of the first clubs in our district that stepped up to be a sponsor for our centennial, so thank you very much for that. And I'm going to leave some brochures with Joe if anybody's interested in taking one of those with him, and he can maybe have them here for future meetings if you need a reminder. I guess the first is to start, why are we having a concert? Well, as Joe already said, Arch loved music very much. He was a self-taught musician. At 18 years old, he decided to learn how to play the flute, taught himself, and 4 years later, he was playing with the Cleveland Symphony Orchestra. So all of the kids that are there now that have been playing since they're 4 or 5 years old have nothing on Arch for sure. He played with them for 14 years and was an active member and enjoyed performing as part of the Hermits Club downtown. So for some of the longtime Clevelanders that know the Hermit Club behind the theaters there off of Euclid Avenue, it's still there, it's still operating, and it's a great place to be. So that's one of the reasons why we picked the Cleveland Orchestra as a part of the celebration for the centennial. The other reason is that there's a long history and a partnership with the orchestra, as the orchestra played for the Rotary conventions that were here in Cleveland in 1928 and 1935, I think it was, 39, somewhere, a few years. 77 years ago was the last time the partnership. So we figured time to get back together again. So along with the music will be a video history of the Rotary Foundation from its start in 1917 through the present day in our efforts to eradicate polio. So I think that'll add a little bit of special interest to all the Rotarians that'll be here. I can tell you that it'll be an international affair. We have people coming from the Philippines, from Kenya, India. So it truly will be a very international experience for everybody. After the concert, there'll be a dinner. That'll be our keynote speaker will be Rotary International President John Jerm and Rotary Foundation Chair Kalyan Banerjee. And we'll also have the induction of some new members of the Arch Clump Society. For those that are not familiar with that, the Arch Clump Society is a special recognition that was started at the Rotary Centennial back in 2005, and it's to honor contributions to the Rotary Foundation of $250,000 and more. So it's a very special ceremony, and I think that it'll be very enjoyable. The goal of this dinner is to raise a new $2.65 million from the Ohio districts. And that's a take from the initial contribution to the Rotary Foundation of $26.50 back in 1917 by the Rotary Club of Kansas City. So for those that may think that $26.50 doesn't buy much, 100 years later, $3 billion in good works around the world. So I think that everybody that's made any contribution to the foundation, Arch thanks you, and you should all thank yourself. A round of applause to everybody. But thank you for having me here today. The concert, I can guarantee you, will be a lot of fun. It'll be a very international experience. I know that President Dave mentioned how much fun he had at the district conference this past spring. This will be even better. Thank you.
I probably forgot to mention that David was past district governor 1998-99. I've got a sign-up sheet for you. This will be passed around. All you need to do is sign your name, number of tickets, and what kind of ticket you want. Orchestra level, balcony, or dress circle. I'll start over here. Is there a price? Prices are listed right here, and I'll start with you.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, David, very much. Just a quick note, you're absolutely right about the Hermit Club. We've been to several performances there. We have a friend that's been on the board. It's an amazing facility, amazing members. And for those who have not heard him, listening to John Germ by itself is worth the price of admission for the dinner that goes along with the Rotary International Conference. He was the speaker at the All-Ohio President-elect Training Program down in Columbus this past spring. Very engaging, very entertaining, and very insightful gentleman. So we're very lucky to have him come into the area. And as you can see on the banner, his theme for this Rotary year is Rotary Serving Humanity. Next up, Joe Avella would like to introduce our Rotary Youth Exchange student.
Thank you, Dave. So the Rotary Youth Exchange Program dates back to 1929. There are about 9,000 students that participate every year. So right now at this time, there's students from all over the world getting ready to study abroad. One of those students is our very own Hudson High School student, Casey Ackerman. And she's going to tell you a little bit about her trip this coming year. Casey?
Thank you. I started this because it was in my family, and it's really exciting for me because I'm all about international, and I love different cultures and everything. And in 20 days or less, I will be going to Brazil to study for 11 months. And I'll be staying in the state of Sao Paulo in the city of Aracatuba. It's about 6 hours from Sao Paulo, the city, and I have a wonderful family. I Skyped with them the other day. There's a 18-year-old son, Luca, a 13-year-old daughter, Bruna, and a mother and a father, and only the father speaks English. And I made a deal with my host mother, and she, if she teaches me Portuguese, I'll teach her English. And so I'm really excited about that. I'll be going to a high school, Anglo High School, and they speak Portuguese there, and it's going to be exciting because I know French and of course English and now Portuguese, and it's a very exciting opportunity, and I'm very glad that I can share it with all of you.
So I just want to thank Casey and the Ackerman family for getting us back into the Rotary Youth Exchange program. Casey's here with her mom, Ellen, and back there. And so thank you very much. And we'll look forward to hearing from Casey during the course of next year. As she's spending a year abroad, she'll be sending us some Facebook photos and keeping us updated on her year. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Casey. You'll be a wonderful ambassador for our club, for our country, and certainly for Hudson. So we'll look forward to hearing about your adventures down in Brazil. Bob Crumpf would like to just tell us a couple of things real quickly about Art on the Green. Bob?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Art on the Green is coming up, and my only reason is just to get it on your calendars. It's August 27th and 28th. I think that's it. That's Saturday, Sunday, the last weekend in August. So a little bit later this year, but get that on your calendar, or make sure you are aware that that weekend is Art on the Green. And I will get a sign-up sheet either next week or the following week, and you can start signing up for that. Thanks.
Just a couple of other things real quickly to remind folks about. The End Polio Now event / party at Progressive Field is coming up. I believe it's July 29th. You can go onto the district website if you're interested and sign up and get tickets. The other thing, the Rotary International Convention for 2017 will be in Atlanta. It's a wonderful opportunity. It's been in Korea and everywhere else. This time it's really very close to home. So if you're interested in going, again, go to the Rotary International website. There is sign up there. There is a discounted registration fee in effect right now. It's a little bit higher than it was a few months ago, but it's lower than it will be a few months into the future. So if you're interested, again, go to the Rotary International website for that convention. Next, introduction of our speaker, Roseanne Drake. If you would do the honors, please.
Good morning, Rotarians. Good morning. It's my pleasure to introduce to you today Mindy Farmer. And Mindy Farmer is the director of the May 4th Center at Kent State University, and she's an assistant professor in history at Kent State. She oversees all aspects of the center's educational programming and academic outreach. And before joining the center, she worked with the National Archives and Records Administration as the founding education specialist at the Richard Nixon Presidential Library and Museum. One of her primary and most challenging missions was to build public trust and establish nonpartisanship educational programming. And she played a key role in creating the Watergate Gallery at the library. So without further ado, let us welcome Mindy Farmer.
Like everyone, I need the phone to keep me on time. Thank you guys so much for inviting me. It's really a great honor, and I could tell you lots of interesting stories about the Nixon Presidential Library. But today we're going to focus on Kent State because I adore your theme, which is, as I understand it, history in your backyard. And this is really one of the defining events of Northeast Ohio. It's not the only one. And history is still in the process of being made. There are lots of things, even within the last month, that will come to define Northeast Ohio. But this is one of the events that I think it's important that people know or remember. And so I'm going to talk about two timelines here. The first is the timeline of May 4, because you can't understand May 4 if you just focus on that one day. It doesn't make sense. You have to talk about the build-up. The second timeline that I think is just as interesting and certainly relevant, especially for people who live here, is the timeline of Kent State coming to terms with May 4. So that's where we're going to go today. So let's start at the beginning of the story of May 4, which is really April 30th. And when we have students, I should say the center's primary constituency at the moment are students. We're very fortunate. Almost every freshman class in their first year experience course comes through the center in some way or another. And that's really important because if you think about it, the freshmen starting this fall will be the freshmen here for the 50th anniversary. So the fact that we're touching nearly all of them is very important to us and really central to our mission. And so when we have students come to this center for the first time, we always ask them a couple of questions, the most important one perhaps being, what was the trigger of May 4? And when we ask that question, we usually get something like the Vietnam War, and that's definitely true. You can't understand the protest if you don't understand the Vietnam War, but the more specific trigger was the Cambodian incursion or invasion, depending on which side you want to stand. But that started April 30th, 1970. And if you'll follow me here, the days are really important. So it's Thursday night, 1970. President Nixon has been elected in part on a campaign to end the war in Vietnam. And on April 30th, 1970, he announces a plan that he believes will end the war faster. One of the problems they're having in the Vietnam War is that the Vietnamese are not following national lines. They're not staying where they're supposed to stay. And there are a number of them that are using the neutrality of Cambodia, because up until this point, Cambodia as a country was neutral. They're using that neutrality to hide resources. And so the supply lines are reaching into Cambodia. And while they're doing it secretly, it's not public that President Nixon and his commanders want to attack those supply lines. And so on April 30th, 1970, Thursday night, Thursday evening, before a national broadcast, President Nixon goes on television. And I should say he'll only make 37 national broadcasts. Things you remember when you've worked at the Nixon Library. He will go on TV and say that he'll announce that they're attacking these safe holds in Cambodia. And for some people that makes sense. But for a number of people, that's very controversial. And so the next day, I did the same thing twice. May 1st, 1970, at Kent State, there's already a protest planned, but that protest, there's another protest that happens, and that one's about that Cambodia announcement. And Kent State is one of 132 nations that has a protest, or 132 universities that have a protest related to Cambodia. And so that's Friday morning around noon. About 500 people show up. They do a number of things. It's impromptu. You can see this is that famous photo of them bearing the Constitution, and you can see the Constitution's actually a page out of a book. And they're bearing it near the victory belt. And it's here that they decide that this is an important enough event that there's going to be another protest, that this one's too small because the announcement had only been made the day before. They want to protest this more, and they set up another protest on May 4. A lot of people don't understand that the protest on Monday, May 4 was a carryover originally planned on this Friday. And if things hadn't happened over the weekend, that's probably where it would have ended. But things escalated. Here's another photo of that protest, which is big by today's standards, 500 people, but for then wasn't all that big. So things changed that night. This is Friday. It's one of the first warm Fridays after a very hard winter. And as you may know, Kent is pretty famous for having a very interesting, colorful bar scene. And a lot of people came from out of town, since it was a nice day, and there were a lot of people playing. They came downtown that night, and they gathered at Kent to see the scenes, to hear the sounds. And it was a tense time, and things got a little out of hand. There was a motorcycle gang there. They were showing off their tricks. There were other things happening, and the police did something that may not, in retrospect, have been the best thing to do. They ordered all those people who had been drinking, who had been celebrating, who were angry, they ordered them out of the bars and into the streets. And, exactly, in retrospect. And, of course, there was some vandalism. Now, the estimates of that vandalism varied greatly, from 5,000 to even 20,000. Probably the amount is on that lower end, but there was definitely vandalism downtown, and the mayor put the National Guard on alert, saying, hey, things may get out of hand here. I should also note that the next morning some of the students felt bad, and so they went downtown to help clean up, but there definitely was vandalism in the town that night. Well, things got escalated from there. That night, so we're talking Saturday, May 2nd, after Friday night's escalades downtown, students gathered to protest. They were upset again. And this time there was real significant damage. The ROTC building, which at this point had even been scheduled for demolition. It was a temporary building put up after World War II to house soldiers, but on a college campus, it became the symbol of the Vietnam War, the symbol of the military. And so on Saturday night, as you can see from this photograph, it was burned down. Now, we don't know exactly who did it. What we do know is there were students there. There were students who even tried to cut the hose of the firemen. They tried to keep that from being put out, but we do know that it was put out, and then something happened, and it was back in flames. And it's this that triggers the National Guard to come on campus. It's this that the university finally decides to call in the people that were already put on alert, bring them into town to protect the town, to protect the university. And it's not a small number. It still amazes me to this day, even though I say it all the time, how many guards were on campus. 750 guardsmen will be on campus. So that's Saturday night, and you can see them here already at the ROTC building. So Sunday. Sunday, Governor Rhodes comes into town. Governor Rhodes is in a very tough election with, he wants to be a senator. And at this time, in Ohio, as in many states, the main platform is law and order. That's one of the biggest things people are concerned about. They're concerned about something Nixon would call the silent minority, or silent majority, the people who are protesting in the streets. People are upset about that, and Governor Rhodes wants to capitalize on keeping people safe. So he comes to town and he makes a very inflammatory, very election rhetoric type of speech. And he calls the people doing the protesting, the people who are, burning the buildings and in the streets, he calls them the worst types of people in America. He calls the students worse than brown shirts, which are Nazis, and worse than night riders, which are KKK. And that was not lost on students. And remember, Kent is a small college, and a lot of people go home on the weekend. So students came back, many of them on that Sunday, having read about what happened in town, having heard what the governor said, and they were really upset. And so, if you woke up on May 4 and you were a student at Kent State, it's very likely you would have gotten 2 flyers underneath your door. One that said, the protest that was planned on Friday for May 4 is prohibited. Do not come, stay at home, go to classes as normal. And another that said the protest was on. Come and protest all that's happened, come and protest. And remember, they would have woken up and known immediately that they were a campus that was occupied because of those 750 guardsmen on campus. So think about where you might have been on that day. Because a lot of students would be on the Hill. Now, the other thing to remember is students were gathering not just to protest, some of them were there because their friends were there. Some were there to see what was happening on campus. This was such a big event. It was we were in national news. Some people came just to see that. And of course, some of them really did come to protest. So this is a bit of the scene on Monday. The people would start to gather around 11:30. More people would gather as classes let out. Some professors even encouraged their students to go to the protest. Not just to protest, but to see what it was like to express your First Amendment rights. And so the numbers vary, but anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 people would be on campus. 77 of the guardsmen who are guarding at first the ROTC, or the burning ROTC building, will march up the hill. Their objective was to disrupt and split up these protesters who had gathered. And this is a picture of the 77 guardsmen who would be responsible for the shooting, starting their march to try and break up the protest. And this is a really important photo. If you look, important map. If you look, here's the National Guard. This is a very big hill. It's called Blanket Hill if you've been on it. A lot of people think that the guardsmen did the shooting on their first pass, but that's incorrect. The guardsmen marched here into what is now the MAC building, which at the time was a practice football field. This is where they first pointed at civilians. Now, pointing your guns at civilians is a very big no-no, but they did it anyways. There were a lot of things that were not in protocol. And it's as they're marching back, after they've already kneeled, after the guards thought they were going back to their original position at the burning ROTC, or the burned down ROTC, it's as they're marching back they do the shooting. Here's where they kneeled in the practice football field. This is the famous picture. This is Alan Canfora at the bottom. And here's the moment of the shooting. So not everyone shot. Most people did seem to turn at once. There's evidence just from this picture, both for and against the idea that there was a call to fire. As a museum, we don't take a stand on that because it's not quite clear whether or not there wasn't. You're certainly welcome to listen to the audio and determine for yourself. But you can see that of the 77, 29 shot, and they fired 67 shots. So fortunately, not all of them shot, or it would have been far worse. They shot into the parking lot, which is where some students were gathered. They would later say some of the most vocal students, but this is not the inclusive students. It's also not the biggest group of students, but they shot into this parking lot. And you'll remember this photo of Mary Vecchio, the most famous photo of May 4, over the body of Jeff Miller. They would kill 4 students, wound 9 others, 13 total victims of the shootings on May 4. And afterwards, confused and angry, students would gather again. And there are heroes in this story, and one of the heroes is Glenn Frank, the professor here, who convinces these students to get off, to go home. And campus is immediately closed. Students have to get home however they can, and they do eventually go home, and the bloodshed ends there. But it's still something the country struggles with. And of course, here are the 4 victims. Allison Krauss, who was a participant, very active, very big protester. Bill Schroeder, who was actually a member of the ROTC. Jeffrey Miller, also protesting, but new to campus, still trying to make friends. And Sandy Schuer, who had stopped in to see what was happening, but at the time of the shooting was on her way to class. So Kent State really struggled with what to do with this, to how to talk about this, how to deal with this difficult history. And in fact, the first official memorial from Kent State did not go up until 1990. So more than 20 years later, we have the very first memorial, and it's still there. You can still come see it. There was even controversy about this particular memorial. The first people who planned it or authored it or offered a proposal, one of them ended up being Canadian. There was a big brouhaha after that, and so this too is not the first choice, and it's not as much as the university had hoped to pay for it. So that's the first memorial. Until 1999, if you went to the parking lot, you wouldn't find any indication of where the students fell. Today, if you come see, it's one of the iconic spots on campus. You can see memorials to each of the 4 victims. But that didn't exist till 1999. And sometimes people ask, well, why is it still a parking lot? And that's because that's the family's wish. They want people today to know what it was like when their students, their family members fell. And so it'll probably always be a parking lot. But now you can know where they were and who they were. In 2010, a walking tour was added. And so now you can go to the grounds and watch a documentary at each of several different spots to learn about what happened. You can see photographs from there. And this was also the year it became part of the Register of Historic Places. And then the Visitor Center itself was not open until 2012. And so Kent State has taken a long time in trying to figure out how to deal with this, what to say about Kent State. Now, I have to say that the feeling has changed, and I don't feel any, I never feel any type of censorship in my job. I'm free to talk about this. We are talking about this. The President Warren is involved in already planning for the 50th. So things have changed, but this did leave a mark, and Kent State is still trying to figure out exactly how to deal with this because it was so incredibly unprecedented. So if you come to the center, you can see some of the sights, you can see some of the sounds. You can see how the world reacted to May 4. You can better understand what the 60s were like. And you can see people react. This is our reaction wall. And it's here where you can get a perspective from the guardsmen. We do have guardsmen talking. We have people from the city speaking. And we have in here some of the victims and the victims' mothers and family speaking. And it's from a wide variety of times. Some are from the day after, some are from just 6 years ago. And it's really powerful to listen to people reflect on May 4. And in the end, we asked our visitors, our students, to come and to comment and to answer that question you see there. What is the meaning of May 4 today? And that's something that's changed. One thing that's different about public history that's not the same in regular history is that public historians have to take people where they are. In history, I always tell my students, pretend when you write a paper that I don't know anything. But we can't make that same judgment when we're dealing with visitors to the center. People come with their own notions, with their own ideas, and so we have to take people where they are. And so the meaning of May 4 will change. And we're in a period of change because May 4 is something that some people remember, and it's something people are just learning about. And especially if you're just learning about it, you're making new connections. So we're at a time where we're struggling to remain relevant, to be respectful, and I do hope you'll all come and tell us how we're doing. The Visitor Center is open 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. We are closed when the university is closed. We're also open on Saturday from 12 to 5. And you'll usually see myself or you'll see Lori Bowes, the assistant director here, or you'll meet a student because students are the primary people who tell this story in the center. We really want Kent State students to be the people who meet our new guests. So please come. And I think I have just a few minutes if someone has any questions. All right. I saw your hand there in the back.
I'm just curious, and I don't remember this. Did anybody, was anybody prosecuted for these?
Yeah, there's so many parts of this story in such a short time that I can't tell, but that is a common question. And it's an unfulfilling answer. So there was even there was a very big debate and went to the Supreme Court over whether or not they could even be, the guardsmen in this case, be considered, could they even be sued if they're doing their job. Eventually the case, after 10 years of back and forth, nitty-gritty legal fights, it went to federal civil court. And in federal civil court, which had all of the defendants against all of the victims, so the guardmen, all of them, against everyone who lost someone or was injured, in that suit, it was determined that the state of Ohio, in this case, would pay some some bit of restitution to the victims, and that was based on how bad the injury was. Sadly, those who lost someone only got $15,000. Dean Kaler, who was paralyzed, got a significant sum. But out of that came a statement of regret, and that's the closest that anyone ever got to an apology. But none of the guardsmen were considered personally, tried or personally held accountable. In fact, the first indictments, called the Kent State 25, were against the students for their role in cutting the firemen's hoses and inciting a riot.
I believe that the shots that the guardsmen took were fairly long distance. Do we have any evidence that they were aiming directly at particular students or just shooting randomly?
So one of the difficulties in determining that is that after the shooting, the guardsmen piled all their guns into one pile. So we can't link one gun and one shot to one thing. And that goes back to your question. You can't try a group for murder. Now, having said that, we do know who the shooters were. And we do know some of them claim they shot in the air. Some of them claim they shot at people. And one of them on I think it was a Dateline special, did admit to shooting one of the people who was just injured. But other than that, no. And will we ever? I don't know. There's no statute of limitations on murder. I do hope eventually we learn more of the story. We do have some audio evidence that perhaps will make this a little clearer, but right now we don't know that. Sure. Okay. I'll go to the mic.
This is a bit more of a comment than it is a question. But at the time of the shooting, I was a faculty member at Hiram, and I was also president of the League of Women Voters of Portage County, and happened to be in Washington, D.C. for the National Convention that weekend.
Wow.
And the National League of Women Voters was so outraged by what happened on campus, but also by what the president had done with basically very little warning, that they held a demonstration on the steps of the Capitol, during which time the FBI filmed us all.
Right.
And when I came back to Portage County, we found the merchants in Garrettsville and the surrounding towns all staying up all night, armed to the teeth in their stores, because they were afraid the students from Hiram were going to march on their towns. It was just fear everywhere. So we had a speakers bureau that went wherever to try to calm things down. But my phone was tapped for 2 years after that, and I have a little line in the FBI's records because of the demonstration and the speakers. Sequel to that story, though, is the cascading effect that it had on other campuses.
Right.
I have come from the University of New Hampshire, and every May 4th, there's a memorial stone right in the center of campus, and every May 4th, there's a ceremony there. So this is sort of a legacy of trying to remind students about civil rights and the consequences if you exercise them at all or even inappropriately.
Yes, one of the things that I didn't mention is that this event and the event at Jackson State just 10 days later, which is a historically black college that lost 2 students in similar circumstances and is rarely mentioned, those events led to the largest nationwide strike of students in our history. Half of the universities either closed or had a strike or had a protest. So those people are part of this story too, and one of the things we're struggling with now is how to bring all those stories into it. I was in Minnesota, and at the University of Minnesota, in one of the small cities, they have a monument as well. It's not uncommon to see those.
Pat Myers, and I was a student at Kent State that day, and I was a non-traditional student, and the reason I'm back in Ohio is because in 1990 they asked if I would come back and be on the platform committee as a non-traditional student, and I can tell you that I very emotional for me. You know, I drove back and forth to campus. I lived close by, so I didn't stay on campus. So I came to classes. And I had to make a decision about whether to go to a Bible study group at lunchtime after I was in Tom Luff's class, Social Problems, who he is the one that said, you know, all right, you guys, why did you cut the hoses? And a couple of, well, we were just, you know, the building. But anyway, he said, if we're really free in this country and we can, this is our campus, you know, we have the right to be here. Come with me if you want to go out. Well, I walked out thinking, do I go to my Bible study class? And the student that was in the class after lunch came by me, and he was editor of the Stater. I said, where are you going? And he said, I'm going to go take pictures. Come with me. So I went up on Taylor Hall on the balcony and stood behind him and watched. And I kept thinking, we've been so fortunate in our country to never have been invaded. Other countries must go through this all the time with helicopters and soldiers with guns, and they were firing tear gas. I can tell you the students didn't have any weapons. When I turned around, and I saw the guard coming up, and when I turned around, I saw the guard coming behind. I thought, I'm out of here. And I ducked around the dorms when the shots were fired. But it was a very traumatic time. I do know, I came back in '90, then they asked if I'd come back and do at Kent State what I was doing in Florida. And then I remained there for 20 years doing government relations. But I do know that many law schools have used this very situation to discuss about when do you have the right to assemble? When do you have the right to shoot people and kill them? When are they a threat to you? And it did become a turning point. But it was very emotional for all of us Midwest Ohio students that are just like me.
Yeah, every day we have people just about come through who've never been to campus before and who have a story. And we are trying to build in, especially for the 50th, when this will be front and center, some types of alternative care for people, because you can't just think of victims as the victims of that day. It's victims from people who attended school. It's victims from the community who were remembered for this. It's we have to extend the definition of victim. So we're trying to plan yoga and counseling and things like that to help address this. And everyone's story is interesting. If you come to the center, I'm sure you're in some of the photos, because we do point out to students that there are people even standing on the roof. Because that's not something we would encourage people to do today. So you're right, and to your point as well, there are so many threads where this is relevant. There is the threat of the First Amendment. There is the threat of social justice. There is the threat of war. There is the threat of peace. There are lots of things where this is relevant, and there's and it's really interesting as we go forward to think about how we can talk about this in a respectful way, in an interesting way, and to make sure it doesn't happen again, and that we understand what happened here. Thank you all. I do have some brochures and buttons. We'll leave those out if you'd like them. We wanted to give you a gift for this, so I'll pass those out.
Thank you, Mindy. Fascinating description of the center and discussion of the events. I was in high school at the time, and I remember the day. I had a couple of older friends who were actually students at Kent State at the time, and so it was a difficult time in our nation's history. Thanks today to our greeters, Mike Swain and Liz Ramsey, the AV setup crew, James Field, Den Rich, and Ron Barnhouse,